Dad, we want to manage your TikTok account for the show.
What now?
You know, TikTok.
No clue what that is.
Oh my gosh, Uncle DJ, you don't know what TikTok is?
I do not.
KLC has Instagram,
Facebook,
Twitter,
YouTube,
but no TikTok.
and if you want to flex, you have to have one.
Do I want to flex?
Yes, it will be straight fire.
Are you guys speaking another language right now?
Dad, you're so extra sometimes. Just watch, we made some TikTok videos.
That's how you do it.
Guys, we have to be careful. Someone here is possessed by an owl.
Who?
That's the thing we don't...
Dump truck in the flesh. Here comes the cootie squad. You should shut up, Heather. Sorry, Heather. Look who's with her. Oh my God. Dang, dang, diggity, dang, 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 diggity, dang, dang.
Those were pretty on fleek.
Nobody says on fleek anymore.
Fine, I tried. So how does TikTok help my show?
It will build your rep online.
And you don't want to be known as an oldie, do you?
And we can be your consultants.
And Aunt Lori said we can't have our own TikTok account.
And Mom said that we have to stop stealing her phone to record videos.
And that's all I needed to know. Go play outside.
Live from Studio A, somewhere inside the great state of Kansas, it's Leadership Late Night, brought to you by the Kansas Leadership Center. I'm DJAJ, rocking the beats and trying to make my dad seem cooler than he actually is. Joining my dad on tonight's show, Steve McVey from the Dirt Roads Network. Now, your host, and a man who still hates a video not shot on a wide angle, my dad, DJ Whetter.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to Leadership Late Night. Hey, thanks for staying up late for a little bit of leadership. And Addison, you are exactly correct. I despise vertical video. I don't watch vertical videos at a movie theater. Why would I want to shoot vertical video on my phone?
First of all, Dad, we don't go to movie theaters anymore.
And phones are vertical objects.
Phones are vertical objects that can easily be turned widescreen. Addison, I noticed the DJ booth is a little full tonight.
If you're not going to take our TikTok ideas seriously,
Then we're going to have to take advantage of the platforms we have.
That's fair. Hi, Callie Jane. Glad you guys could have a little cousin fun tonight. That said, this is why I'm not buying you a phone until you're 18. You know way too much about social media.
Phone or no phone, Dad, how we engage in this world is a bigger issue. It might be an adaptive challenge.
I'm so proud right now. You've really been soaking in this framework.
Yes, I have. So you'll buy me a phone?
No, that's still a hard no.
That's one interpretation.
All right, nice try again. We're done now. Let's talk about the show tonight. Steve McVey joins us from Dirt Roads Network. Steve is a rural church pastor in Lamont, Kansas. He also, again, runs this network that connects many rural churches together in their work. And he has done some fascinating engagement when it comes to the adaptive challenges of today that are facing communities of faith. Now, I know some of you out there are saying this, I don't connect into a community of faith, not my thing. I don't go to temple, I don't go to a mosque, I don't go to a church. That's fine. But know this, one of my favorite sayings is everyone is everyone. And what I mean by that is if you truly listen to what people have to share, there's always something to take away and apply to your life, to your context. And I think that's the case. Consider this with communities of faith. What they are really at the heart is high authority, high volunteer systems. They are systems that often rely on a very small staff, if not a staff of one, and rely on volunteers connecting in to do the work. Steve has a fascinating story to tell about what really the purpose of church is. And I think it'll speak to a lot of you out there that work in nonprofits, heck, that work in businesses, about what it means to engage the real issues and really have purpose in your work. So no matter where you stand on the context of faith, the construct of faith. I hope you'll dial in tonight and enjoy the conversation with Steve. That said, it's time to get to work. I'll hit the desk. DJAJ and Callie, you guys hit the beats.
You got it, Dad.
Great job, girls. Callie Jane, fun to have you over here in the DJ booth. And DJ AJ, always rocking it, staying up late, and fun to be back with you all right here at the Leadership Desk. Look, usually this is where we bring on kind of a fun segment. We'll do some social ding-dong distancing. Maybe we'll have a leadership lesson from young Parker David. But this week, I wanted to put the segment on the back end. You'll see why after this interview. Steve McVey and I sat down earlier this week and had a fascinating conversation. And basically, I want to get right to it. I want to bring our guest out first. So as we do that, let's take a look at a little bit of his credentials. Once again, remember, Steve, founder of the Dirt Roads Network. And what that Dirt Roads Network does, Steve will tell you more about. But it connects communities that are often very isolated, connects them virtually and in other ways in the work they're doing within the Christian church. He's also the lead pastor of Lamont Wesleyan Church. And again, I'm really encouraging everybody out there, dial into this interview, dial into what Steve has to say, and find a place for it to impact you and speak to you when it comes to leadership. Without further ado, let's head to the Leadership Library. Well, Steve, I'd love to welcome you to the Leadership Library. And if you'd start by just giving our audience some context on your connection not only to KLC, but the work you're doing right now in the state of Kansas.
I live in the Flint Hills in a community that isn't even a town. We are probably 30 miles southeast of Emporia. There's 28 people that live here, a little town of Lamont. I've been a pastor here for 20 years. And I could tell you that story sometime, but we've had dramatic growth, and we've planted churches and all that kind of stuff out of this little town. Dirt Roads Network is primarily about rural churches, towns of less than 5,000. We originate here in Kansas. We spread beyond Kansas now. We've only been a network since like late 2017, so we're brand new in a lot of ways. But KLC has given us a grant, and it's been very helpful. I think we've sent 40 people to some kind of KLC training. We believe that a life-giving, Bible-believing, community-transforming church is what's needed, and what KLC teaches really helps with that community-transforming part. So we're really excited to be a part of the Kansas Leadership Center.
I wondered if you'd start by speaking to the connection to the rural community and how they're experiencing life right now. And we're going to have a lot of people watching this that might not be experiencing rural life, but where are there some maybe connection points for everyone when it comes to the work you're doing in rural America?
I think rural America right now is as divided as the rest of the country in terms of opinions. And a lot of people think that, just because you're rural, there's sort of a stereotype, especially since the election of 2016. There's just like this, okay, rural people are, and then you just fill in the blank. And that's just not really where we are at all. We struggle with so many things. We have poverty. We have, our poverty is hidden. But honestly, I think we're a lot like the inner city. I mean, I really do. We have all of those challenges, but they're spread out, so they're hidden. Within the church communities, the division works itself in, because that's sort of where the rubber meets the road. That's where decisions need to be made. And here you have pastors that are often underpaid, undertrained, in difficult situations, and then suddenly they're handed a bunch of stakeholders that have a wide range of opinions. And it works out, all those opinions work out into the community, because nothing's private,
The range of polarized responses to COVID-19 have been well documented on this show, and faith communities have often found themselves at the center of these debates.
I think it sort of came as a shock. Okay, all of a sudden you're not going to meet. And I've seen some people respond to that in ways that I don't completely understand. We're like, okay, my religious liberties are being, somehow stepped on. And that clearly wasn't the intention of what we were trying to do. We're trying to be loving to our communities. But there was a huge technical challenge with that. There's no other way of putting it. I mean, all of a sudden I have to go from my study into the studio, and I'm dealing with people, many of whom do not have good internet, many of whom have no real computer skills. And so I'm pouring myself into that, and it's taking so much time. I'm trying to keep people connected that I don't have time to look up as a leader and see what's coming. And what I saw is that when we come back together, it was going to be a severe technical challenge. Okay, how do I keep social distancing in an organization that exists to be socially together? Okay, so how do I do that? But if I just focused on that, I was going to miss the adaptive challenge. And the adaptive challenge had to do with the fact that our stakeholders had so many different perspectives about COVID-19. And every one of those stakeholders is valuable. And how do I, like I've heard Ed say before, that, really listening to someone and making sure that all stakeholders are heard is one of the biggest challenges that we face. Because what we really want is people to come in that are from a different perspective and have them learn our perspective and adopt to that, rather than just valuing them. And what I saw is a lot of pastors were going to get blindsided.
Steve's passion for helping communities of faith through the Dirt Roads Network led him to create a video advising churches to think about creating trustworthy process around how they might reopen, rather than just considering the nuts and bolts. That Facebook post has now been viewed more than 2,500 times online.
In a faith community, and maybe this is true of everyone, but in a faith community, there's just this belief, well, if we have the same faith, then we feel the same way about all these other things. And guess what? That's just not true. And so all of a sudden, like, hey, let's just come together. Some people are going to want to hug. Some people are going to want to shake hands, and others are going to be wearing masks and may not come back for 6 months. And if we don't understand that going into it, it could turn into a really challenging time. And people want church to feel good, that's part of what they want, is to be helped, physically, spiritually, emotionally. Well, all of a sudden, all that separation that takes place in the secular world comes right to the church community, and that can cause people to check out, and so on and so forth. It can be a really challenging thing.
His advice for those in authority right now: create transparent processes and honor relationships.
What I would say is that for many people, they got confused. They thought that having church was the purpose of the church, rather than understanding that you have church to accomplish a purpose. And so that, is sort of a foundation, just made all the rest of this all the more difficult to bring together. There are times when someone needs to make a decision. I understand that. And especially with technical stuff, let's just make the decisions and move on. But if you have to pull your authority card to lead right now, you're in trouble. You have to be able to lead out of relationship, out of influence, listening, you basically have to go to, you lead now, or what is it, whatever they call it now. You need to develop those skills that will allow you to lead in an organization where all the stakeholders matter. Because if you whip out that authority card right now, people are hurting so much. They need a relationship. They don't need a boss. They have lots of people screaming at them, lots of people telling them what to believe, lots of people that don't care what they think themselves, but want to tell them they don't need another leader like that. They need someone who's going to listen and lead.
I just want to name for our audience, you were gracious enough to step aside. We were going to talk last week, and I felt it was important to maybe bring on a guest from Minneapolis. And so, first of all, thank you for being gracious in that. And second of all, I just think that is now layered on top of this, and it doesn't even feel right to name it as another layer, this idea of injustice that we're facing. But can you speak to what that journey has been like for the rural churches you've been working with? Because again, I think the danger of the single story here that you mentioned in the beginning is we paint a picture of maybe rural America being oblivious to what's happening, around the nation in some of the cities.
Yeah, absolutely. And just like COVID-19, there are, so many different opinions, and sometimes it's a generational divide, sometimes it's a political divide. And in the middle of all that, you have this clear teaching that you're supposed to be like gathering around of Jesus, and Jesus made it very clear that, you know, in Christ Jesus, there's neither Jew nor Gentile, is what the scripture says. And so that, you know, racial equality is a biblical concept, but people just struggle. One, they don't always know what they should do. They, you know, in like, I'm in an area that really is 98%, you know, white at this point. Now, I wasn't raised that way. So I was raised in a town. I was raised in Lansing, Michigan. So I have a different experience. You know, for me, the idea that there's white privilege is just a given. You know, what I've been telling people is that they really do need to listen. You know, like for me, I can remember stories from when I was like 10 years old, the first time I began to notice that some of my African-American friends were treated different, even by teachers. For me, the narrative is, I mean, it's real. And for those who've never seen it, and then for those who've seen those issues used politically, and sometimes in ways that are for political causes they don't agree with, they want to reject that. And so I just say, please listen, find a good book. I don't, you know, white fragility. I mean, just find a book that is fair, because you can listen to a book and emotionally respond to it without having to be having to worry about how you're responding to that book, you know, because sometimes I think that's the other thing. Sometimes a rural white person might be afraid to engage in the dialogue for fear that they're going to say something in ignorance that sounds very racist. Well, you can listen to a book and just allow yourself to be educated, I think, is the first step, because for many, they are just very unaware of what the national narrative truly is. And when they hear it, they think that it's just propaganda.
But Steve is clear. Rural churches and rural America have a role to play in addressing systemic racism.
This binary view, you know, that it's, you know, you have to go, you know, real right or real left is just really challenging. And I think that's not just rural. I think that's everywhere. And for those of us who are Christ followers, we believe that Jesus was a mediator, you know, that he stood between, you know, the two, and that's the role of those who are in the faith community, is to be mediators, peacemakers. And it's just not real clear how we're doing that sometimes.
Don't mistake the role of peacemaker as devoid of conflict. True peacemakers, including the model of Jesus in the Christian tradition, aren't afraid to raise the heat when the purpose is clear.
But the peacemaker asked penetrating questions, that rather than accusations, penetrating questions that force the heat to go up. And so I think a good peacemaker asks the question that turns up the heat without it being a personal attack. And so that's what Jesus would do. And, you know, who's your neighbor? Well, here, let me tell you a story. Who do you think the neighbor is? That type of thing. And that particular story that I'm referring to was about race. And Jesus just, you know, absolutely turned up the heat with a nice story and a question, you know. So I think the heat needs to be turned up, but you can do it. You can speak the truth in a graceful way, I think.
Leave us here, Steve. And again, thank you so much for the time. What's giving you hope, even in these tough times? Where do you see hope in the work?
I have a good friend who is a missiologist, and I'm not going to drop his name because then people go look up his books and all this kind of stuff. But anyway, I was talking to him one time about how people in the church often miss the true purpose of the church, and how really what happens on Sunday morning doesn't really always get it done, but it takes up 70% of our resources. And I'm like, okay, so what's the deal there? And what he told me is if you really want to be a good chess player, take the queen off the board and learn how to play. Then when the queen comes back, you'll really know how to play. Anytime that you go through a time of challenge, like we've been through these last 90 days, in essence what you do, and for the church this happened, the queen was taken off the board. So this has been an opportunity for us to learn, how do we accomplish our mission when the queen's not there? And as the queen comes back, I think those who saw this as an opportunity to learn rather than just a challenge to be managed, those folks are going to end up with much stronger organizations once things get back to normal.
So well said. Steve McVey, thank you so much for joining us on Leadership Late Night. I hope you enjoyed it, because we certainly did.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. We believe so much in KLC and their heart for Kansas. We love it. We think there ought to be a USA LC, you know, I mean, let's spread this everywhere.
Thanks again, Steve, for that great interview. I was really struck, especially by this idea of the role of a peacemaker in today's world. And so before we get to the chat, please do send in your thoughts. We'll get to those at the end. Let's play with this phrase in a new edition of The Behavior. With a nod to the old Colbert Show segment, The Word, this is our second attempt to blatantly modify his old comedy gem at a much less impressive level. But hey, he had a team of writers. What we'll do here is play with behaviors that aren't exactly written down in our KLC leadership framework, but maybe should be given the times. Tonight's behavior suggestion, act peacemakerish. This message is for everyone, but give me a few moments to set this up by speaking about a faction I know well, the church. And let's be honest, although we treat the church as if it's some unified body, one of its greatest gifts to the world has been the reminder that when you disagree, you just start a new branch. Ever since Martin Luther nailed his 95 Theses to the door of the Catholic cathedral, the urge to divide has been built into the work of the church. Luther wanted change in the church. He wanted reformation. Instead, he got a denomination named after him that explicitly he never wanted. Did you know the word Catholic actually means universal? It does. It's supposed to be the universal church. But in its modern form, it's merely the root of a Christian tree that has too many branches to count. This dividing, this forming of new sects is not unique to Christianity. It exists in most religions and is likely part of what it means to be human. We tend to define ourselves by who's in and who's out. And as I reflect on the last 2 weeks in this country, I'm left reflecting on what our work is in the world. I worked in churches for nearly 12 years as a youth minister and adult ed director. There are many in those churches who are happy I now work full-time for KLC. And I can't blame them. I was so sure about how I saw the world that I rarely met people where they were at, instead using every debate skill I'd ever learned to persuade them to my side. That's not a joke either. Soak in that high school glory. Anyway, I was so sure that my theology was right, especially when I was working with crusty, conservative adults, as I would have not so nobly labeled their faction back in the day, that I rarely sought to raise the heat for a purpose. Instead, I was always up to debate the most inconsequential of things. Should students wear hats in church? Should we have an American flag in the sanctuary? On and on and on, you name the debate. Let's take this idea beyond the church, though, now to America. We are not all that good at reconciling. We sit in our tribes and we point our fingers at the problem over there. And while there are some major issues that we need to reconcile coming out of the White House right now, that's merely a distraction. Listen to what Steve McVey just told us. Peacemakers look for higher connections and higher purpose. They don't fight over trivial differences. Peacemakers ask tough questions of themselves and others in their own tribes. They don't just yell at others to get on board with their ideas. Peacemakers start where others are at, listening to the story behind the opinion. Peacemakers seek to live in the in-between the divisions, so that they can find a new path forward. So, just a little more than 2 weeks removed from the death of George Floyd, I'm asking us to name the debates that may distract us from the real work. Is kneeling during the national anthem offensive? Should we rename military bases that have Confederate names attached to them? Should NASCAR ban the Confederate flag at races? Who is and who isn't a racist? To be honest, all those questions feel a lot more comfortable to discuss instead of asking why we have a country that supports a system that gives more privilege to people who look like me. Because you can claim to be all about law and order and respect, but that's a tough case to make when that system you want respected wasn't created to respect all citizens. So let's not get distracted this time. Let's ask tough questions of ourselves, of our own tribes. What's our role in the mess? Let's raise the heat on ourselves to seek reconciliation. Let's remember that there isn't just right and left. Let's seek to do work somewhere in the in-between, because that's a space where we can act a little more peacemakerish. And that's tonight's leadership behavior. Well, just a reminder, if you want to read more about Steve McVey, and again, just so thankful for him, I think he's going to join us on our Zoom after party. So stay tuned for that if you want to know more from Steve. But you can actually read about him in the KLC Journal. He's been everywhere thanks to his great work recently. And we just think the world of what he's doing. And I hope I got across what I was trying to say there. I think it is about some introspection right now. I think our work, especially for those of us that probably have white skin, is really to speak to our own tribe. And between what we talked about last week with Dave and Joe, if you caught the show, if you didn't, I encourage you to go back. A couple of locals in Minnesota doing some great work. And what Steve talked about this week, and he's doing amazing work. And he's doing work often in communities that it's hard to get to where maybe the national conversation is. He's got to start where his community is. They've got to do the work that they need to do right now. And I just thought it was a beautiful description of what that looked like, and it really made me reflect on all the shortcomings I had in my ministry work, where I really felt it was about, moving a body in a direction that made sense to me. Well, that's not the work. The work is starting where people are at. The work is having honest conversations, and the work isn't out there. Sometimes it's in here so that we can go out there and do other work. And I hope that speaks to you, whether we're talking about a community of faith or we're talking about an organization, or we're talking about making progress in this state, in this country, in this world. And so it's just been a fascinating couple weeks to explore the leadership behaviors of KLC and apply them to everything going on in the world. And in most of all, my encouragement to all of us is that we continue to find ways to engage these tough situations. One of them continues to be the pandemic in this world, perhaps a second wave, we don't know. But another one is keeping the name of George Floyd alive and keeping this conversation going. It feels different this time, and I hope it will be different, but it's going to take hanging in there. I already see debates splintering off in other directions. This conversation's easier. Let's work on this technical thing. Let's rename this. We should do that work. That is important work, and we've got to keep having tough conversations. We've got to keep raising the heat on ourselves. Let's take a look at what you all had to say tonight. I want to get to some comments. I love that during the interview, and so many of you noticed this, Steve was just on fire. What did DJAJ and Callie say, right? It was fire. That interview was fire, I believe it is. So many just direct quotes being put into the chat. Seth Bate pointing out, you have to be able to lead out of relationship. People are hurting so much they need a relationship. They don't need a boss. Yeah, Seth, that one resonated with me. Jeff mentioning not pulling the authority card to lead, much like the Apostle Paul did. Very Christ-like. Yeah, lead out a relationship, not the authority card. Laura saw that as well. Michelle Florence, thanks for watching tonight. Love leading out of relationship. Everyone is counted and accepted and listens to each other. Not just a one-person show, many using their talents in need. I love that. And the reminder is we might not all agree. There's no church in the world. There's no community of faith. There's no organization where everybody agrees on everything. It might be learning about how to disagree better, right? Trevor McPherson weighing in. I had to be a mediator just yesterday between two factions. The meeting went well. We have a new starting point today. Meeting people where they're at. Playing the role of a mediator. I love it. Yeah, for those of you asking about the debate trophies, one of them my wife, I waited 15 episodes to mention way back in high school. I did a little debating, so absolutely. And Corey Moan, I'm with you. Thane Chastain 2020. Let's do that. I don't think it's too late, is it? David Whetter weighing in tonight. Asking tough questions is what Scripture is all about. Luther said the Bible is not a book of answers. It is a book of questions. Pretty interesting. And again, something I think we can play out into the world. And from Lori Alvarado, lead out of relationships and influence, good now and in the future. Build those relationships now. Continue to build those relationships, because you never know when the urgent times will hit, and you'll have to begin to lead in new and fascinating ways. Well, the time flew tonight. I hope there was something you took out of it. For those of you who want to join us on the Zoom after party, Julian's online. He's going to post that link right now. Steve McVey is scheduled to join us in the after party so we can dice up his interview, ask him a few questions. We'll meet for about 15, 20 minutes, and we'll get everybody on their way. So for those of you who want to join the after party on Zoom, be sure to follow the link that we'll throw up here in the chat box shortly. Beyond that, it is time to say goodnight, and we have two people to say goodnight to. A little sleepover action between DJAJ and we'll call her DJ CJ, DJ Callie Jane. So thank you, ladies, so much for your help tonight, and now it is most definitely time for bed.
Good night, Dad. We're going to bed.
Sleepover!
Make sure to go check out Dad's after party on Zoom.